Good evening and welcome to Conversations. I'm your host, Orim Meikle, and I want to invite you to join me for 60 minutes of insightful, engaging, yet casual conversation as we do every week. I want you to remember that this is a no judgment zone. All ideas are welcomed. We're simply trying to find the best path forward. And it has been said that we need more minds at the table. The more minds we have, the more ideas we can get, and the better we can make a selection as to what is the best process for us to move our race, humanity forward. So I want to welcome you. Remember, we're on Facebook tonight, we're on YouTube, and we're also on Teams. You can join the conversation. Before we get going and I introduce our subject tonight, I want to take a moment to just bring over Bukola Watson, my assistant. She's going to talk to you about how to engage the chat, online conversations, and so forth. Bukola, what's on tap for tonight?
Yes, thank you, Orim. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's conversation with Orim Meikle. We welcome our guest on YouTube as well as on Facebook. But what we would really like is for you to come over onto Teams. So I will be dropping the link so that you can FaceTime with us. And the only thing we ask is that you please leave your cameras on so that we can see your lovely faces. And with that, I'm going to yield back to Orim.
Thank you, Bukola. Thank you so much. I already see that Giselle is with us tonight. I see Robert already ready to go. So let me introduce what we're going to talk about tonight. It's a little different, but it sort of dovetails from our conversation around technology and the advancements in technology. I want to talk about artificial intelligence, robotics tonight. I want to get your thoughts on how you feel about the advancements that are being made in this area with the introduction of things like Siri, for those of you that have that on your phones and in your cars, in your offices, Google Home, where you speak to these machines and they can play music for you and give you information. How do you feel about artificial intelligence? You know, as I was preparing this week, I saw a news flash and it stated that the Israeli army had just released a military robot. And this robot has the ability to assess the war zone, and on its own, it can open fire on its own. So I want to ask you, are we going too far? Are we treading on dangerous ground, or is this the way forward? Robotics, artificial intelligence. And as we continue the conversation, I want to ask you whether or not you think these machines can actually think on their own. Can they ultimately turn against us and work to our detriment? So that's my thought for tonight. I'm going to throw it out there to you. I'm going to start with Giselle tonight. Giselle, what are your thoughts about artificial intelligence? Are you okay with Siri, Google Home? Do you feel someone's watching you? Are you comfortable with the direction that we're going with respect to artificial intelligence? Giselle, you may have to unmute yourself a bit.
I think
Okay.
I have to
There we
remain
go.
Maybe
unmuted.
just tell
Yes,
Siri to tell Siri to unmute you.
I don't have Siri at home,
Yeah.
so I'm not very technologically inclined or
Yeah.
knowledgeable.
Right.
Um, but I think again, and I think we had discussed this in a previous conversation.
We did.
That the advances in technology, um, it's really whether it's good or evil is based
Yeah.
on the hands in which
User.
they are. So
Okay.
I definitely think artificial intelligence robotics could be put to great use. So for example, I work at OPG,
Right.
and which is
Yeah.
nuclear generation company, and where we generate electricity by nuclear power,
Right.
using nuclear power. And often to go into the very dangerous parts of the machines, they have developed robots.
Right.
Instead of sending humans, they've developed robots. So in that case, we see the great use, the positive use of
Right.
it to, to save human life or
Right.
prevent death, type of thing.
Do you see,
But at
Giselle,
the
do you see any dangers in it though? Are there any dangers in AI?
Definitely, and it's there are dangers in it simply because of man's mind that it can't be put to use. So, for example, the lack of privacy. We don't know who is listening in on our conversations. Even the
Right.
simple thing as the camera on our laptops.
Hmm.
I don't know about you guys, but look, I see, right?
Right. Right. You
Because
do you actually think someone is intentionally watching you?
yes, yes,
And
that
here's the
and,
question:
and
for what
and
for
I
what
don't know if
purpose?
somebody's intentionally watching me now, but they have the access and the power to view me.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
again, it's based on the use that we put it, based on the mind of the people.
So for you,
So
Giselle, everything comes down to the user, not the instrument.
yes, not the instrument.
Okay.
And you asked another question as to whether we think I think they can turn against us. That's a tricky question because I was wondering that myself. So for example, a few months ago, I had looked at a documentary on Netflix.
Yes.
With respect to artificial intelligence. I didn't look at the whole thing, but what startled me was one of the scientists said, even we had mentioned algorithms.
Right.
Right now, that there are a lot of algorithms out there that we don't even know what they're doing. And this is a data scientist, a computer scientist saying that there are algorithms operating out there that they don't know the power of, and maybe.
But who would have put the algorithms out there? We would have put them out there, right?
Yes. So here's the
Have
tricky
we
part.
lost
Yes.
control?
So that's, we may have lost control. And I'll tell you how we can lose control. With every program that is written and uploaded to a computer, there's something that's called documentation that must go along with it. So there must be something in English language, in readable language, that explains the power, explains what the software is doing, explain where it sources the information or what's the output, all of those type of things. But with various generations of, say, both robotics and software, and as well data sciences, sometimes we lose, and it's just human error, we lose the
control, you're saying.
I just said it. The documentation around the program. And
which is the control, right? Which is the control.
Which is control. And I mean, it's happening right now in lots of organizations, just in their normal operations, where they have software running different parts of the organization. But because people have moved on, and who have written those software have moved on, and the software hasn't been properly documented, the existing people don't know the power, don't know what to do, they just do things by rote. So therefore,
okay, Giselle,
so
I'm gonna come back to you, because we're gonna ask the question whether or not the movie The Matrix is happening right now in our lives. But I have somebody new online. Is it Lena or Alethea? Can I go to you and ask you, how do you feel about AI? Are we going in the right direction, or should we be afraid of the advancements in technology?
Lena, you have to unmute. Perfect.
Hi, Pastor Meikle.
How are you?
Greetings from Texas. How are you guys doing?
Oh, welcome from Texas. Good stuff.
So from a healthcare point of view, I do believe that technology, the use of AI, robotics, have impacted healthcare in a positive way.
Okay.
I do think that a lot of the things that machinery and technology has been able to do now, these things were not able to have been done before. So it has given, some positive reviews. However, it does have an upside. I think it does make you more vulnerable. I think we are in the information age. Like they put a hip they replace your hip. That hip has a barcode number. So,
but is that for tracking? Do you think that's for tracking purposes?
It is for tracking purposes. So you go to do an MRI at another place, and they, at that point, they can track and say, well, you can't go through the MRI because of this particular machinery that's in use. So that barcode becomes necessary. So that's when you can check, okay, is it compatible with the MRI? So, a lot of these things have barcodes. It's for tracking purposes. I do also, living in the States, I do believe that you asked Giselle a question, if we're being monitored. I do believe we're monitored, we're watched all the time. It's just not
but for what purpose are we being? That's the real question, because I think we're insinuating something. For what purpose are we being watched?
I think it's in the States, we call it Big Brother. You know,
Oh, yes.
I just somebody's always looking. I just think, you know, you'd be so surprised. Even I have Siri in my home, and you'd be so surprised. Like some of the things you will be in the kitchen talking, and then all of a sudden, what you're talking about just pops up on your phone. So, how did Siri get that information? You know, how did the phone generate that information? So, you know what? It's
Is
that's
it
just
something?
what I
Is it
feel.
something? No, and that's fair. Remember, no judgment zone here. Is that something that we should be afraid of? Is that something that we should master, or simply just accept as the reality of our times?
I think partially we need to accept as the reality of our times because we're
Okay.
in the information age, but I also think that we need to do things with caution.
Okay. And is it the coming of the Antichrist that we're experiencing?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I think
That's
so.
fair. I
This is
appreciate you
setting the
saying that.
stage. Yes.
Setting the stage. Okay.
Yes.
I'm gonna jump up to Robert, then I'm gonna go down to Garrick and over to Daniel. So Robert, what are your thoughts about AI, artificial intelligence? Good, bad, neutral?
They're good. Good evening, everyone. They are very good for us, and the way I put it is the same way everybody is putting it. What we use it for is the key.
Okay.
There are things that humans couldn't do before. Right now, with the help of artificial intelligence, we are able to do them,
Okay.
and they are helping us in so many fields. Like we're talking about information age. When we talk about information,
Right.
data is really the key there.
Correct.
And big data, to analyze big data and come out with information that will be very meaningful for use for humans, using our human brain to do it by
Can we
ourselves
go,
is kind of,
Robert, can we go too far? Even in data collection, can we go too far?
yes, we can go too far
Are
because
we teetering on going too far right now, or are we where we're supposed to be, you think?
I think it depends on who you're talking to.
Okay. Okay.
You know, when people who are concerned about privacy think that they're going far. But
Right.
let's remember that everything that we do has one thing I always call the bottom line.
Okay.
Organizations are always thinking about the bottom line.
It's profit, right?
It's profit. It's economics is attached to everything.
Okay.
So as long as, I mean, the people are going to use the data to be able to better their bottom line, they are okay with it. The other people who are concerned will be the privacy people who are thinking that that might infringe on their rights. And that's where the conflict is. So everything that happens with us, there's always going to be the different groups and the different stakeholders and what their interest is.
Okay, thank you for that, Robert. Garrick, let me hear your thoughts on AI. Are we in a good place?
Well, whether or not we're in a good place really depends on your perspective.
Okay.
Right. Because I have a theory, and the longer I lived, I think the more that theory is being proved true, in that I believe that all discoveries in science and all progresses in technology are really a progressive discovery of the wisdom that God already has.
So you're sort of in Daniel's camp, I think.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear his comments on this particular
No, he
topic,
shared that a
but
few weeks ago, that this is really just unveiling all that God has put in the world.
Right. Not even on what he's put in the world, but knowledge that he's already have. So when you when you talked about the different technologies that we have and whether or not they're monitoring people, the story that instantly came into my mind was the story of I believe it was Elisha, where it was being revealed to him the enemy's movements before they made them. Right. So in a sense, he had Syria and Amazon in their camp, and he was collecting information. Right. And so God has always, throughout the history of his interactions with people, revealed knowledge to man that they didn't have. So what man is now doing is using our limited mind to simulate omnipotence, is what it comes down to. Or even things that when we can speak to our devices and have them do our...
Is it also our quest to be God?
It's desire to be like God is innate in every human.
I
But
wasn't even saying like God. I like that phrase, but I'm actually putting it out there. Are we trying to be God?
I believe, well, if you're not, if you don't have a relationship with God, then absolutely you are. Because as we talked about several weeks ago, God gave man the mandate to dominate. And if that mandate is not subject to a higher power, i.e., God Himself, well, the only other power it can be subject to
It's going to be perverted, right?
is going to be perverted. So man is going to use that power to try to control each other, as opposed to using that power to be like their creator.
Okay,
And
so Garrett, let me ask you something quick. Do you see that perversion in the development of AI any at all?
oh, absolutely. Because the development of AI, and I have full respect to what Atlena was saying about how it is helpful in medical advancements. A lot of the things that are driving AI and technology is really more marketing efforts and efforts to grab more marketing share. So, whereas the increase of information could really be used to maybe predict human nature and behavior and be more effective at sharing the message of God's love for people, it's really now being used just to drive a marketing agenda or to drive a bottom line.
So Garrick, listen to it, because that's the same thing Robert said, that the bottom line is profit. We could put it like this: the bottom line is the love of money. Now, here's the challenge with that. If the bottom line is profit or the love of money, is that not the root of all evil?
I would actually make it. I would actually expand it beyond just money, right?
Okay.
I think it's really that man has if you're not connected to God and don't have a reality of God's unlimited provision, then you really become develop an appetite to try to grab as many of the earth's resources that you can, money, power, control, basically trying to
Dominion out of control, right?
basically trying to preserve your own life using any of the resources that are available. And in this case, information, right? So unless you back away from that innate desire to dominate and control and grab Earth's resources and submit it first with the realization that God has provided everything for me already. Now, Lord, what is the actual purpose of this information that you are releasing into the world, and how is it really supposed to be used for your glory, and then go back and reclaim it for its original purpose.
Hold that thought, Garrick. We'll do that on the backside of this episode. We'll ask the question, how can then AI be used to further the kingdom of God? Let's go over to Daniel for a moment. Thank you, Garrick. Daniel, what are your thoughts about artificial intelligence? Are we heading in the right direction? Is it just a reality of the time? Should it be something that we're afraid of? Give me your thoughts.
I actually think we are behind.
When you say we, who's we? The body, the church?
I'm talking about mankind.
Okay.
The body is even much more behind that. Yeah, it's much more behind this.
You put the body behind mankind.
It's like number last on the.
You've got to be a little nicer to the church.
but even as humankind, including everyone, we are still behind. The discovery is only now. But King Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. If you can start there, right? What you see now has been and was always has. It's just when we're discovering it. In the 1960s, they discovered they made the Concorde. If you look at the technology that was built into the Concorde, or if you have read about the Concorde, because I like speed, so I read things that are fast, and the Concorde was one of them, which could touch between New York and London in 3 hours.
Yeah, I remember
it would just do half the journey than a normal flight plane. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying this to say this. It was in the 1960s, and now we are 40, 50 years later, and we are discovering technology now. So on our platform as the Kingdom of God, we are only discussing these things now. If this was a worldly panel that has got nothing to do with the Kingdom of God, this would be nothing new to their world. But to go back to your question, they named it artificial intelligence. I don't know. I will drop the word artificial. I'll just call it intelligence, because how excellent is the name of the God of the Lord in all the earth, right? That's just high up there. But artificial intelligence, we must embrace it. We must embrace it, and we must move forward because we are way behind. We must move forward to give direction. Why it's going the other way is that when anything that God gives to the earth is received by those that cannot strategize according to the laws of the kingdom, yes, it becomes abusive. It's going to be abused. No question about that. It's going to be used for purposes of greed and profit and marketing. They have no interest tracking me for anything. Most of us don't really have anything to be tracked for in terms of their strategy for profits. They are tracking us to gauge our behavior.
Right.
So that when they gauge our behavior, they know how we eat, how we live, what we drive, so that they can make us as comfortable as it can be for the purposes of building their empires if they are not in the kingdom of God.
Okay, thank you, Danny. I appreciate that. We're going to come back to you because I want to ask you another question, whether or not you believe these machines can think. Bacole, let me go up. I see some people that are not on camera. Are they willing to come over in the conversation?
Yes, Giselle, I do see your hand, but let's go to Janelle or Natasha.
Okay.
Either one of you have any thing to say in terms of what we're discussing? We're discussing God and artificial intelligence. I know you joined a little bit later. So Natasha, would you like to weigh in, or Janelle?
Sure. Good evening, and I apologize that I'm not on camera. I'm just driving.
That's
But
okay.
good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi. I just wanted to make a comment that everything that you have talked about, every discipline, every tool that's being used in the world, I love how you're curving the conversation because it all starts with God. We've all been given this tool first,
Right.
but we have rejected it. So I'm driving and I'm saying, we're talking about artificial intelligence. This is something that we should have been using in the kingdom of God, right?
Okay.
And as things advance, we should be using it. But every conversation that we have, yes, it first starts with the body of Christ. But anyways, I am for it. Again, I'm my only concern is, and I always talk about the children, right? Because they're the next generation. I'm concerned that our children don't have the proper training on how to use these devices or these tools that are being used to, as my brother said, to gather information. So we're using it in a negative sense, and that's what concerns me. Because once children are exposed to it prematurely, then they're not able to properly manage it. Then it becomes what you said, Pastor Meikle, perverted.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bacole, someone else before we go to Giselle's hand. Janelle's coming in.
Janelle, would you like to weigh in?
Why don't we take Giselle's hand?
Yeah, I think I know she was having some issues with her audio.
No
Go
problem.
ahead, Giselle.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. No, I just wanted to add, we've identified the commercial or the competitive advantage gained by artificial intelligence for corporations, but we also have to remember the military purposes as well.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, the internet was created by the US military.
Correct.
For communications. So AI and access to our individual information is very important to the world powers, simply for espionage.
Sounds like you're suggesting that behind this is the essence of destruction.
Not necessarily the essence of destruction, more the essence of control. Okay. Who knows more or controls more? A wider bandwidth, quote unquote, controls the earth.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Who knows more controls the earth.
Right. Or who can access the information more.
I'd leave it just like the way you said it. Who knows more controls the earth.
Yeah.
Let me ask the panel a question. Do you think that these machines can think on their own? Garrick?
I don't think that they can think on their own, but they can. I'm trying to think. I have a bunch of different thoughts and just trying to put them together in an organized way here. It's almost like when we talked about fire a few weeks ago, right?
Mhm.
If you can use fire in a controlled manner and to cook your food, but if you leave too much kindling close to the fire, it can spread and burn down your house in a minute,
But
right?
is the fire
If
is
you're
the
not
fire
careful.
running on its own, or did the fire have an origin with you? Like the
It
fire
has an
didn't start
origin.
itself.
It has an origin with you, but it has its own properties, which, if not properly controlled,
It
become
can spread.
destructive. So, by the same token, one of the challenges with people that are developing AI and developing these new advances in technology, and I'll just refer to a video I watched the other day. They talked about an invention that they had in medical science, right? And it talked about how it had the potential to rewrite a person's DNA, and could be used in order to prevent them from getting a chronic disease.
Okay.
But with that same potential, it could also be weaponized, right? Now, the fact is, it's like you only discovered 1 grain of sand on a beach, right? When it comes to something as complex as the human body. So in the wrong hands, you let that loose, and it now becomes that same technology that could be used to cure can actually be used to create an artificial biological weapon, right? So by
Okay,
the
but
same
Gary,
token,
hold that thought. I'm just asking the question though.
yeah.
Can the machine in and of itself think on its own?
No, the machine can't think on its own, but it can be programmed to process information and make assumptions and make speculations based on the information that it has.
Okay.
And I'm gonna, draw references to some science fiction movies,
You mean
like
the Matrix?
well, The Matrix is one of the most very popular examples, but
Mhm.
then there was also Terminator, where the
Okay.
machines created a computer virus, and
Yeah.
then the solution to the computer virus was a virus protection program, which had to be installed on all computers in order to prevent the virus, but it
Right.
was actually the machines inoculating the world from the virus, and by the same token taking over all the computers and then turning against their creators, because the creators were the creators of the virus. So
Mm.
the original algorithm was for protection, but because it was programmed to adapt and to learn about new viruses, it eventually got to the conclusion that the creator of the virus had to be destroyed. And we see the same theme repeated in movies like iRobot. It
Yeah.
was discussed in great length in books like 1984, which is where the
Right.
whole concept of Big Brother comes from. So, because as men, we're trying to do one thing, but
Yeah.
with our limited understanding of all the implications, not just of the implications in our current time, but we
Right.
don't look at things from a multi-generational or an eternal perspective. We
Okay.
can't see down the line as to what our inventions is going to produce further on down the line. And so the machines can't necessarily think, but we can set in motion
Frankenstein?
things that have. Sorry.
Frankenstein?
Well, I think Frankenstein is really thinking too small.
Okay.
I was thinking like Skynet, right, for Terminator. Right?
Garrick, I'm gonna see if I can get Dion Cockhead into this conversation for a quick moment. Dion, if you're in the on Teams, I'll ask you the same question. Can these machines think on their own? Nicole, is Dion in the room?
Yeah, he is, but I'm not sure. He might not be in the space where to
Okay.
answer. So I'll check in with him.
Okay, check in with him in a minute. Go
Yeah.
to I think it's Atlina
Giselle.
has, or is it Giselle? Okay.
Giselle had her hand up first, and then I'll come to you, Atlina.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Pastor. So to answer your question, I definitely do not think they can think. They can think on their own. They can
Okay.
only do what we programmed it to do. The
Okay.
problem is, and which I alluded to earlier, is that we have lost track of
Okay.
what they can do because
Okay.
of say lost documentation, inadequate documentation, and
Right.
what I think sometimes happen. So for example, if we have lost if we connect two systems
Yes.
where we don't know the full capability of what each system can do, it often a byproduct would be unknown outcomes, and those
Okay.
unknown outcomes are often unwanted outcomes.
Right.
So I think we are not keeping pace, the documentation and the tracking the power of the machines. We are not keeping pace with the development of the various
So
forms of
this
AI.
idea of the machine thinking on its own is really us losing control of
That's
what
right.
we set in motion.
That's right. That's right.
Again,
Yeah.
I'm asking, is this Frankenstein?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Atlina for a second and hear her. Thank you, Giselle.
Okay.
So, just listening to everybody, I just had a
Yeah.
couple, questions. So, following this line of reasoning,
Okay.
like God makes humans and humans make machines. So,
Right.
by logic, one might constitute that,
Machines make machines.
no, humans make
That's the logical step. God makes man, man makes
so
machine.
God makes humans and humans make machines. So by
What's the
logic,
next? What's the next step then? What's the next step?
one might conclude that artificial intelligence
Can reproduce itself.
could not be from God. However, I think that contrary to bioethics and geoengineering, it does have some place in religion. Even though, when you read the news, you see they have created all these things. And I think the bottom line is profit. So, electronics, we've got electronic scriptures we're using. A lot of people use their smartphones in church now, so that's a plus.
Don't go there yet, because that's for my last. How can we use this to advance our agenda? But go back to the machines thinking on their own. Are you yay or nay there?
I don't think so. I think the machine will act according to the data that we've put in there.
So we're still in control. Giselle is saying that in some cases we're losing control of these machines because we've put in some things we forget. She calls it documentation. Machines start spitting out a whole lot of processes. We have no control anymore.
Sometimes when you look at these movies, you gotta wonder.
if fiction is depicting reality.
Exactly. So
let's list the movies and you tell me which one of them is coming to pass. Is the Matrix going to happen to us? Are the machines going to take over and begin to farm us to produce themselves? I
don't think so, but anything's possible.
Okay.
I would hope that it doesn't come to that, but then, who knows?
I'm going to ask everyone on the panel, then I'll go to Daniel for his thoughts. But does everybody remember the movie Will Smith starred in? It was called I, Robot. Do you remember the name of the robot? Very interesting name. The robot's name was Sonny. I think that's a very interesting name. He's called Sun. Nonetheless.
SONNY.
Very interesting. But Daniel, let me get your thoughts. Can the machines think?
Orim, I've got Dion waiting to speak, so let's just get Dion's take, and then
Daniel, hold for a second. We're just gonna go to Dion, okay? Then we'll come to you. Dion, come in the conversation.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think we need to consider that technology and its advancements is great, but we have to understand that there is an agenda that's there. Okay. And yes, and I agree with Orim. I agree with you as far as the church using the technology to our advantage.
Okay, but back up for 1 second, Dion. I want to ask you this question though. Do you think the machines can think on their own?
Absolutely.
Tell us how. Tell us how.
It's actually studying our behaviors. All the platforms that we're using right now, social media platforms, it's actually using that information, and there are bots that are actually studying the information, and this information is being collected into various systems in order to create this artificial intelligence so that information can be readily available for these robots. And so, you have projects by Ray Kurzweil, and he is adamant about creating this artificial intelligence and developing a way that you can actually move human consciousness into a machine. Like Sophie, they have a robot called Sophia the robot, and so they're moving with this agenda, and I think it probably stems from man's wanting to live forever, and using these robots as somewhat of a vessel that they can live out their life, their consciousness through. So I think that is the evil in it, but I say that we should be knowledgeable that these advancements are happening so that they don't overtake us.
Okay. I appreciate that, Dion. Notice that Dion said, and I didn't know this, that the robot is called Sophia, and in Greek, that's the term for wisdom. Quite interesting. I don't think these names are chosen haphazardly. Thank you, Dion. We'll come back to you maybe at the latter end when we talk about advancements. But let's go to Daniel. And Daniel, can the machines think? Daniel, we're on you now.
If we are comparing to thinking as human thought, at the level of human thought, no.
Okay.
Yeah, the origin of thought, the origin of thought is given by God, was given to mankind only.
Okay.
Anything that comes after that is originated from men for good and bad reasons, but the origination of thought or thinking is with men. So even if we talk about all the robots that we're talking about, they have been fed information. They didn't just appear.
Okay.
They have been built and fed programs and algorithms that make them function that way. So yes, according to what Garrick said, at some point they will make assumptions based on collective data over time to say, if you do this, you do that. That's why you find now, if you drive with your car, like we go to different sites, if I drive there 2-3 times, as soon as I get in my car, it will give me that location. Because I've turned on notification. It will say it will take you so many minutes to drive to Downsview Park, because it has studied my behavior. So it's what we give them that then makes them expand and make their own decisions. But the origin of thought, according to the scriptures, is given to mankind in the book of Genesis.
Right. And so the machine can do nothing that we have not fed it. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. That is correct.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel.
That is correct.
There is a comment on YouTube that actually supports what Daniel just mentioned. And I'll just read it very quickly. It says, AI cannot think on its own, can be programmed to attack or not attack. And this is from Natalie John.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalie. I think Robert wanted to jump in the conversation now.
Correct. Robert, please unmute and go ahead.
Yes, what I wanted to say is that they can think on their own, but their thinking is limited.
What do you mean, Robert? They can think on their own, but their thinking is limited. What do you mean?
Yeah, their thinking is limited in the sense that all the algorithms that are built in is what they can use. And they cannot factor into their thinking other external information that comes in. What they can always think about is how they are meant to function. So thinking on their own, yes. But the point is that when anything that is external, that is beyond what they were programmed initially to do, comes in, they cannot be able to think on their feet like as human beings are able to factor in some either qualitative information or other quantitative information to be able to make a decision.
I want to ask a question, and the panel can jump on it. Robert, can we think about something that we have not been fed either?
The question again, sir?
Can we as human beings think about that which we have not ourselves been fed?
I think the information that comes across you is what makes you to be able to think further. Like,
what's the difference between us and the machine then, based on that?
Is the human, like as Lena said earlier on, is God created man and man created the artificial intelligence. So whatever is coming in is mimicking exactly how the human beings are. They cannot do anything beyond what the human beings didn't think.
I'm wondering if we're not God's robots. But nonetheless, Garrett, can we in any way think about something that we haven't been fed?
We absolutely can, right?
Mhm.
Just by speculation, imagination, meditation, there are a lot of ways where we can take the information that we've observed through our five senses and
Mhm.
formulate new conclusions that
Okay.
we haven't necessarily been explicitly given.
Exposed to. So we can
Exposed
use
to.
the senses given to us to come to conclusions.
Right. So
Okay.
I can just take this conversation away and think about everything that everybody has said and come to new conclusions that are not discussed. That's a
Question
part
for
of
you,
our
Garrett.
humanity.
If no one's ever told you what it is to be cold or what cold is, could you ever thrust into that environment? Could you use your senses to come to the conclusion that I'm cold?
Absolutely, but I wouldn't necessarily call it cold if that's not a part of my vocabulary. But I wouldn't react in the same way because this new information has led me to the conclusions that I need to put on extra layers or I need to get myself to another environment. So something is happening in my body that I would react to, and I would draw conclusions about what I need to do to adapt to that situation.
Okay, I like that.
So
I like that.
now here's and that is fine for me as a human because I have judgment and I can make decisions that are for the betterment or for the extension of my life.
Can the
Now,
machine do that? Does the machine have judgment?
well, here's the thing. I believe that we can program the machine to simulate that behavior. However, we cannot program in the judgment. We can only program in the logic, right?
I
So
see.
using Daniel's example about going into his car and it automatically saying, okay, you've driven to Downsview Park a number of times.
The machine's never going
Therefore,
to tell Daniel that you've driven there too much now.
well, not necessarily, but it may come to that if the conspiracy theorists are right.
Listen, I
But
was driving my car and the car told me I was drifting over a few times, once, twice, three. The machine said, it looks like you're tired. You
right.
should pull over for a coffee.
So
That was what my car said. My car said that to me.
So the next generation of machine, okay, or of the software in your computer, particularly, because my background is computer engineering, so I can think about kind of what the next logical release would be. My next thing would be, wouldn't it be great if we kept the driver safe by turning off their car if they got too tired, right? Or wouldn't it be a good idea if we kept the drivers safe if they couldn't even start their car if they were indicating that they were too tired? So I can program the computer to act on the logic of the situation, but I can't program any judgment in it. And I can program it to act in a protective way or a destructive way, depending on the mind of the programmer. And if I build enough provisions into the next versions, I can actually have it make assumptions which are incorrect and dangerous and limiting to the user of that technology because I can't program morality. I can only program in
When it comes to the
conclusion.
machine,
And
your will
so,
be done.
sorry?
When it comes to the machine, your will be done.
Right. Now,
Okay.
I'm going to make a reference to Captain America.
You're watching a whole lot of movies, Gary.
Movies that have a parallel to real life, where the Zola algorithm said we can analyze the way a person's voted, the schools they've gone to, and all of their past behaviors, and we can determine that this person will become a terrorist in this period of time. So we will actually program the machines to execute them before they actually commit a crime. Now that's taken to the nth degree, but the logic still remains the same. What you can build into the machine's learning these quote unquote logical conclusions, which may not be correct because they're not subject to human governance and judgment.
Right. Well, listen, Bacola, let me find out from you, anyone on off camera that wants to come in, because I want to use the last 15 minutes to get some ideas as to how we can use AI to advance the agenda of God. Bacola, anyone needs to come in off camera?
Yeah, so Donna or Benjamin, if you guys would like to come on. But Adelina actually posted a question on the chat. Adelina, did you want to go ahead with the question or do you want me to read it out? Let me quickly read it out. It says, my question is based on Robert's comment. Could robots possess distinctive characteristics like abstract thinking, creation of art and music, emotions, and physical abilities? And then she goes on to say that she doesn't think that even futurist robots can define these sets of distinctions.
Right. And
So
you're asking whether or not they can do that on their own, or do they have to be programmed to do that, right?
you have to unmute, Adelina.
Both, because there was a study that it's called the Alpha Go Zero, where this robot that they had created, they said that it could learn without human intervention. So
did it say how it would do that?
It could learn without intervention because it said that it exceeded the human algorithmic calculations among many others. So that's my question. If
But you see,
someone
what
can
you just
explain
did there
that
was,
for me.
believe it or not, what you just did there was the exact script of the movie. Because here you had all iRobot, all these robots lined up, and then out of nowhere, there's this one robot that
Yeah.
breaks from the norm and
Yeah.
able to feel and think on its own. Is this really where AI can go? Can it really go there?
I
Because
think
that's
so.
dangerous.
I think so, and it
So you mean
becomes
one day
very
your car,
dangerous.
one day your car could say, "I'm not taking you anywhere." I just don't. Today we're not going anywhere today.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, Margaret wants to jump in. Margaret, is it Margaret Benjamin?
That's correct. Please go ahead. You have
Come
to
on
unmute.
in, Margaret.
You need to unmute. Margaret, we can't hear you. You need to unmute.
Can't hear you.
Joined, so I'm just listening for now. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're glad you're on camera. Listen, let's use the remaining 13 minutes. I want to ask everyone on the panel, even those that are off camera, how then can we use, because we're talking a lot, and we're obviously not experts in this area, but we're having a wonderful conversation. How can we use AI to advance the agenda of God? Giselle, can I start with you? Are we currently using it? You talked about Bibles on our phones and ways of getting the gospel around the world. What are some of the ways that we can use this for, can we say, the glory of God?
This might be a breach of privacy, but in the same way, for us to study human behavior and so identify those in our population who
But what's wrong? What's wrong with that, though? What's wrong with that? Those who may have need of the gospel?
Sorry?
What you said, study human behavior to identify those who may have needs, right?
Right, exactly. Need to hear the gospel.
What would be wrong? There's nothing wrong with that.
Targeted. Sorry?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well, it's breach of privacy because you have to access the same way the big corporations and the big brother are monitoring us to learn our habits and so market to us and probably for espionage and such things. You know, while we might be using it for good, but we'll be using, that having access to that same private information.
Okay. I wouldn't mind if we can get a couple of robots to do some door-to-door evangelism.
Yeah, but that'll be kind of lazy.
Save us some time. Thank you, Giselle. Can I go to Daniel? What are some of the ways that we can truly use AI to advance the agenda of God? It doesn't necessarily have to be always spreading the gospel, but anything that advances the agenda of God for the betterment of humanity.
One of the tools we can really use it is for giving out information. Based on the strategy of the kingdom. Because we can reach places that we could have never reached in our lifetime.
Fair, yes.
We can give out information. Just for an example, because of the pandemic, we were having classes in Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, with 20, 30, 40 people, just giving out basic information about the strategy of the kingdom of God. Something that you could never do. So we have to advance from what we used to call evangelism, like we have known it, to be able
sending
to
the
compete,
missionaries
because there is a competing.
world, right?
That is correct. There is a competing force against us. So the force is expanding at 20, 30, 40, 50 times far more than we do. So that is why how they flood the airwaves with all these other things, because their agenda and where they are going is different from what we are going and what we've been instructed to do. I think in terms of reach out for information based on everything. And let's be open to talk about. Let's be okay if pastor says today we're going to talk about climate change in the church. We should embrace that. We should see that as a vital message, because that's where the world is, and that's where the attention is. That's where all the technologies are going. But if we are not ahead in those things and talking about the subject of today, just like we are talking about AI, we are always going to be behind. And even behind, we're also going to be used by those things again. It's not that we're just going to be behind alone. We are going to promote, and our funds are going to sponsor those people, because we need the service. Now we are on Zoom. Who on Zoom? We don't even know who, right? So,
exactly. Yeah.
and
It's interesting. I think.
Yes. So we can change.
No,
So
go ahead, Daniel.
we can actually change even the economics of the kingdom of God. Learning from them, because they are ahead, to be honest. And when we get to where they are, then we can go ahead and now start to drive the bus and direct to God's agenda.
I like that. That's very, very good. When you were talking, I'm going to go to Garrett in just a moment. I thought about the fact that I think as Christians, we talk a lot about the Bible, but we may not fully know how to apply the Bible in the movements of time. So we end up talking about the historical stories of the Bible, Jesus in the manger, Jonah and the fish, etc., which is all true, but we don't know how to make its application to where we are right now. And I think that could be why we're struggling and so far behind. We have truth, but we don't know how to make truth relative to moments that we're in. Garrick, what are your thoughts? How can we use AI to advance the message?
Well, I wouldn't even just limit it to AI. I think that there's, well, first of all, let me say I totally agree with the Daniel saying that we're really far behind with a lot of the information that has already been out there, not even moving up to AI. And I'm just going to throw out one example. Jesus gave the parable of the sower and talked about how, there was 4 types of ground that it fell on, and only one of them was fruitful. In other words, only 25% of people that hear the gospel are going to be receptive to it and become fruitful. Right? Fast forward that several centuries, and we get the Pareto's principle, which we now call the 80-20 rule, which is used in marketing all over the place. But Jesus already gave that principle, which means that if we go and we knock on 100 doors, at the most, there's probably only going to be about 20 people that are receptive to hear the gospel. Right? So those numbers just right there can drive our evangelism efforts, and all the information that's out there publicly available. We don't even have to get to the level of personal privacy, but it can really dictate how we structure our approach to spreading the gospel of the kingdom. And I'll give a quick example. I don't want to take up too much time, but I remember I've done several mission trips to Mexico, building houses and such like that. And before going, we'd be presented with a jacket of the demographic information of the information we're going to. So we knew before we're going in, this particular community, they're very family oriented. So when we went and we talked about the gospel, we talked about God wanting them to become a part of his family. Or if we went into another area and they said, well, these people are very Catholic, well, we know that with these particular people, their sense of God is really works-based. So our evangelism message was
data-driven.
Was data-driven. It was about how a relationship with God doesn't have to be based on your works, right? So everything that we do, even if we were able to put together the right resources, when we ask Siri or Google a question and we said, what's the weather today, right? And it gives us information from all of these weather databases, but what if it also gave information from a scripturally based database on the current situation, right? So if we said, what are the top news stories of today? And it would give us the economic climate and the business climate and whatever. And it would also say, just as an example, and the scripture says that at this particular time in history, this is what would be happening. So therefore, here's the approach that you might want to take if you're a believer. But we haven't stepped into that arena to throw our hat in the ring and to throw our voice into the ring to make it, to basically to dominate those areas which were meant for us. We were meant to dominate.
Right. In other words, we haven't salted those areas, right?
Exactly. Or lighted them, for that matter.
Or lighted them. Yes. Let's go up to Adelina, and then I'm going to come back down to Daniel, back over to Robert. Adelina?
Sure. I had a quick question, and it was based on what Daniel said. So,
Yes.
would
Throw it to
giving out,
Daniel.
yes, would giving out information include the use of robotic priests and use of the humanoid robots? So,
No, then I'd be out of a job.
well, Japan,
So
they have
no
started
no
using
robotic
robotic
pastors for me.
priests.
Not
In Japan, they perform funerals. You know, they have been performing funerals.
I'm gonna do the funerals.
So we do want to disseminate the knowledge of Christ, and I think as Pentecostals or as Christians, we do need to use technology to our advantage.
Okay, let me ask Daniel. How would you feel, Daniel, if you lost a relative and you came to the ministry and we said we'd do the funeral for you, and you showed up that day at the cemetery and a robot showed up with a Bible? How would you feel, Daniel? Said, my name is, and I'm
I
here
would
for
wake up.
Pastor Meikle.
I would wake up and try to find what's going on.
But that's Adelina's question. How far do we want to
But
take it? We want to
I
engage
think I have a
these.
question.
Uh-huh.
No, I think it comes to a place of abuse sometimes.
Okay.
And remember, we said that whatever it does, the reason why you're calling it a robot, someone built it.
Right.
And someone gave it information. If you can tell me it just dropped from somewhere, then we have another conversation.
Right, exactly.
But it's made by men for quest of science, greed, anxious to know, expand for good and bad, but the origin is man. Okay. And I don't see anywhere in the scriptures where God created another alien on the side that he gave the thought process as we do have. But I do have a question that also plays into what we're talking about.
Go ahead.
Part of what we need to change so that this theology can work, this technology can work for us. I think I said it last time. It is our theology.
Okay.
It is our theology. It is our starting point. And my question is, I can put this to the panel. Why did Jesus come? Or why did Jesus have to die? Because it speaks to exactly where we are. That's what we need to find out.
Okay. So what you're really asking,
because part of it, he could have died that we have this technology.
Right. You know what I think? I think he died that we might have life and have it to the full. And I think this is part of having the fullness of life.
Right.
We've got about 3 minutes. Giselle, you have your hand up very quickly.
Yes, yeah, quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, what I want to say is that the name of the technology itself tells you about the technology. It's artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So the machines are being programmed to look like intelligence, but it's artificial. It's not real. They can only do what we program it.
So are the machines in our image?
I would say so, yes.
Okay, that's an interesting
what we're thinking. It would be what we're thinking.
Right.
And the next thing, so for example, like the robots and etc. That were being built to say to replace humans. Just this morning, I heard of something that over the pandemic, with people being so lonely and stuff, in spite of Facebook, in spite of Instagram, in spite of Zoom and team calls, do you know what has gone up? The population of adopted dogs. Right now, that even in the veterinary society community, there's a problem with respect to getting enough treatments for dogs in terms of medical. The vets are overbooked. So in spite of all of the intelligence, we still need, I don't even
something that's living, right?
The love touch. We still need the emotional aspect that machines cannot give us.
Need something that's living.
Yes.
Okay. Robert, can I forego you tonight? We're running out of time. I just want Bacola to give us a last word before we go.
Yes.
Got 30 seconds.
One last question just from YouTube, and that's for you, Orim. Would you fly to Israel in an aircraft pilotless? It's a yes or no question answer.
Only if we're going to Israel. No,
All right,
nowhere,
there you have it.
I thought
nowhere
you
else
said
in the
we were
world.
going to
Just
have one.
There you have it, Craig. So we want to say thank you to everyone for
thanks,
joining
Craig.
today's Orim Conversations with Orim Meikle. It has been really engaging. People want you to keep your job, by the way, Orim. So
Oh,
there are
great,
comments out
great.
there that you
Thanks,
should.
guys. Thanks, guys.
All right. With that said, thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you again next week this time.
All right.
Great
Thanks, everyone. And
conversation, great
remember one
conversation.
thing before we go. All things were made for him, and for his glory were they created. Have a
Amen.
wonderful week, everyone. We'll
Amen.
see you next week on
Amen.
Conversations. Bye
Amen.
for now.